Let's go. It's Dallas week, and the Eagles have a chance to really take a stranglehold on the division. Yet while the defense has held up its end of the bargain, the offense is going to have to show up. In this video, I'll get you caught up on all the latest injury updates, plus go over the best picks and plays for the game on Sunday, as well as discuss all the storylines and matchups you need to watch out for. So let's talk about that and everything else around the Birds. But first, let's run it.
He like to see the fear come out of people, and I ain't really got no fear. So we gonna see what's going on with that.
What's up, guys? Do me a favor, drop a like because it's Dallas week and we need that positive energy, especially because the vast majority of analysts are rolling with Cowboys this week as one of the teams they wouldn't be surprised to pull off an upset.
I believe they're wrong.
I do too, but truth be told, Dallas is entering the game with a better defense than they had, adding to an impressive run game and a prolific passing game to leave Jimmy Kempski to admit it's possible that the Cowboys could present some problems this go-around versus Philly. Because honestly, if you go based off of the stats, Dak Prescott has been almost unbeatable at home, featuring a, get this, 21-2 record versus NFC East opponents at AT&T Stadium. And yeah, I hate to admit it, but that's insane because Dak's record against the NFC East is the best for any quarterback against a division with their home winning percentage since 1970. Something even Stephen A. Smith can't get past when he's picking who's going to come out on top Sunday.
What?
Philadelphia or the Cowboys?
I'm picking the Dallas Cowboys to win this.
Hold on, we couldn't hear you.
You know it's bad, and there's a lot of uncertainty when even Stephen A. can't bring himself to pick the Eagles over the Cowboys. Yet while we're making predictions, and I do think that he is incorrect in his assessment there, go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know who you think the first touchdown score will be in the game on Sunday. Because like I always do, I'm going to select one lucky subscriber who gets their pick to win any jersey of your choice. Remember, that's as long as the Eagles win the game. So come hang out during the live stream as we cheer on the Birds. Not gonna lie, it's crazy to think about Prescott having not lost a home divisional game since 2017. But guess which one that was? Yep, that was the 37-9 beatdown that he suffered at the hands of the Eagles. You know, when they went on to win the Super Bowl.
I think I see where you're going with this.
Just saying, this week more than any other feels like a statement week. Because while on paper and according to Vegas, the Eagles are favorites, the Birds sweeping Dak Prescott in the regular season would be pretty impressive. Anyway, I know that's a lot of hype for Dallas, so let's keep it real. The Cowboys have yet to beat a team with a winning record this season, whereas the Eagles will enter Sunday with the best road winning percentage in the NFL under Sirianni and are 9-2 in their last 11 away games.
This 2025 Eagle team has never played at Dallas.
They're certainly capable of sweeping Dallas, especially with a defense that travels like Vic Fangio's. I mean, for all this talk about how the Cowboys aren't the same team as in Week 1, neither are the Eagles. Remember, Jalen Carter didn't play after getting kicked out, Nolan Smith wasn't 100%, BG wasn't even on the team, and most importantly, Jalylan Phillips wasn't playing on the edge. Which, by the way, what JP is doing out there is really unheard of. Because since joining Philly, the Eagles' defense with Jalylan Phillips on the field jumps from 0.01 EPA per play to 0.34. Translation, they're about 13th in the NFL without Jalylan Phillips, yet they have a defensive efficiency grade that's almost 3 times better than the Houston Texans, who are the best graded unit in the league when JP's on the field. Like, that's insane to put that in perspective. I know it's a small sample size, just a couple games, but that's ridiculous in 2 games. We all see it, though, what JP and the factor that he plays, but it's just a proof to be made, or kind of a proof point of people that, again, they keep going back and, Dallas is not the same team as Week 1, look out. Neither are the Eagles. Now here's the thing, if the Eagles win on Sunday and then they can beat the Bears on Black Friday, along with the Chiefs beating Dallas the day before on Thanksgiving, then the Birds will become the first back-to-back NFC East champion since 2004.
We could treat this as if we're in the playoffs, if you want to think of it that way. Win or go home. I feel like that's the situation that we're in, and I feel like that's the right mindset that we got to have.
We desperate too. We trying to get it going. We desperate too.
How close do you think you guys are to kind of figuring this offense out? Because obviously the personnel's there. We know you're super talented. How close do you think you are to kind of clicking?
I think we are. I think we are. I think that's the mindset to have. I think it's just really just cleaning up those mistakes. It's not about just being close. It's just really just finishing drives. Defense been playing incredible, and we're just trying to do our part, and that starts with the things that it takes no talent, as Nick says all the time.
Look, against the Dallas defense, there are going to be several opportunities for this Eagles offense. The question, as it is every single week, will they capitalize? However, I will say this, there are multiple opportunities that you can take advantage of with Underdog. And as one of the season-long sponsors, you can get $100 in bonus funds when you play $5 and get additional gimme picks. By the way, if you're traveling to the game and haven't checked out Underdog yet because it's not available to you in your state or you can't do the pick'em options, the good news is Dallas, you can play it. So scan the QR code, use code Philly Special, or click the link in the description, get the app, sign up, and you can play with the Underdog. I'm telling you, with the NFL action heating up, there's all kinds of other boosts you can take advantage of for the NFC East matchup. All right, last week, both of our plays hit with crazy multipliers, so we're going to try to go back-to-back this week. For the plays, first, I'm taking Saquon Barkley anytime touchdown. Dallas has given up the 8th most rushing touchdowns, and I know that there's some other areas you could go with, but this is a spot where I really feel like Saquon's due. And then next, I'm going to take Devontae Smith, go higher than 58 receiving yards because Dallas runs zone at one of the highest rates, and Smitty typically is the go-to for Jalen when they're playing against zone. Finally, the last play, you have to take an opposing player. You already know this if you played the game before, but if not, you have to take an opposing player. Ceedee Lamb, I'm saying he has more than 6 receptions. After all, he had 7 in the opener versus Philly, and honestly missed a couple other opportunities. As always, let me know what you think about those plays, and good luck to you if you're telling. If you're not, but you're considering getting signed up, though, scan the QR code, get signed up with the best option in fantasy sports, use code Philly Special, get $100 in bonus credit, and who knows, maybe we hit it big again this week. You know, Anthony DiBona made a great point that while Ceedee Lamb and George Pickens get the headlines, seeing how Vic Fangio limits Javonte Williams in Week 12 is a key matchup to watch. Because Williams has had 90-plus rushing yards in all 4 of the Cowboys' wins this season. Yet when he's failed to eclipse that mark, Dallas is 0-5-1. Now, while Williams didn't get that many yards versus Philly in Week 1, they did allow him to score twice. But that was before the massive turnaround of the run defense. Since as we've been tracking, after the embarrassing Week 6 loss to the Giants, the Eagles have done a great job shutting down opposing rushing attacks, with their last 4 opponents all being held under 4 yards a carry. However, even with the D trending in the right direction, Fangio knows the challenge his squad has going up against the number 1 passing offense in the NFL.
They're one of the best offenses in the league. I mean, they're like 2 in yards, 2 in points, or 3, first in passing, but yet 12th in rushing, which, they got balance. They're really a good offense. And with those dynamic receivers, the tight end, Javonte at running back, and Prescott makes it go. He's having a hell of a year.
You got to appreciate the fact that Fangio always keeps it real. Sure, Dallas is a challenge, but the DC also believes there's a few areas to exploit on Sunday, and perhaps none more so than the Cowboys' O-line. Now, to be fair, their interior is pretty solid. Yet you can't mention anything about the battle in the trenches without getting into the first meeting between Jalen Carter and rookie guard Tyler Booker. Reminder, the guy who called out JC and said he's the player he's most looking forward to playing. Of course, that extra chatter probably played a factor in the Breadman getting too emotional and spitting himself out of the game in Week 1. And while he's trying to contain the emotions, JC is looking forward to teaching the Rook a thing or two in their first meeting on Sunday.
You see they more experienced with, that new guy. He's learning more. He's getting better at doing little things that O-linemen need to do. I'm just saying that because I'm going to be going against him, most of the time. Other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it. He like to see the fear come out of people, and I ain't really got no fear. So, we're going to see what's going on with that.
Vic said you've kicked your game up to another level because maybe conditioning is better and your health is better. How do you feel about those things?
Hey, whatever Vic says is right. Vic going to keep it real with y'all. He keep it 100. And, I feel better working on conditioning and stuff like that, and it's showing up.
This really does feel like one of those games Jalen Carter can make a statement, especially if he can keep Dak Prescott off balance and uncomfortable in the pocket. Granted, the biggest weakness to capitalize on is probably the tackle spots, because Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele have really had their struggles. And if you can get to Prescott, then he'll almost certainly turn the ball over. Heck, he surrendered defensive touchdowns 3 times over the past 4 games he's played at home versus the Eagles. The thing is, though, the pass rush has to get home and not just get pressures. Since, believe it or not, but Dak is the highest graded quarterback when throwing under pressure this season. That's why I'll continue to say this week it feels like the magic number on offense to pull this one out is somewhere around 27 points. Anyway, speaking of pressures, though, despite how bad the Cowboys' defense has been, they're actually first in the NFL in hurries and third in snaps with pressure, which has only gotten better with a new addition of Quinyon Williams, who had 1.5 sacks, 7 total pressures, and a 21.4 pass rush win rate in his debut with Dallas. Add that to Osa Odigizua having a career-high 8 pressures versus the Raiders, and the best-graded interior defenders in the NFL were Cowboys in Week 11. Now, sure, that was just the Raiders, and technically Jordan Davis was actually the NFC Player of the Week or Defensive Player of the Week, not Quinyon Williams or Odigizua. So there is that. But the Eagles' O-line has had its own struggles as of late. And the concern is if the Cowboys can get pressure up the middle, that could force Hurts to bail and throw off the passing game. So I asked our very own Eagles writer Anthony DiBona about that and everything else ahead of the rivalry matchup.
Because if you look at in week one, both teams played very close. Obviously, the Eagles won, but now Dallas's defense has gained quite a few weapons, and most notably is Quinyon Williams, who made his debut for the team last week, and Osa Odigizua, Kenny Clark, that kind of trio along the interior really gave the Raiders problems. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles handle it, especially with Cam Jurgens. Does he play? Does he not play? If he plays, he hasn't looked like he's been fully healthy basically at any point this season. Even Tyler Steen at right guard has struggled in recent weeks. He's allowed 7 pressures over the last 2 games, and he allowed a sack against the Lions. And even the Cowboys guys on the edge, I know may not be the biggest names like the guys in the interior, but Jadeveon Clowney, James Houston, Donovan Ezeraku, who a lot of Eagles fans wanted the Philadelphia to draft in this previous year's draft. So that's going to be a test for Fred Johnson and Jordan Mailata as well. So I'm really interested to see how Philadelphia's offensive line, it's kind of been a roller coaster for them this year, where they've showed some good glimpses, but then they struggle. So it'll be fun to see how they match up against Dallas.
Finding some consistency. That's what we continue to ask for. Let me ask you, though, and we'll get to the full injury report and updates there too, but should the Eagles play Cam Jurgens? He's listed as questionable, and we'll get the official determination, but even if he is good enough to get out there and play, do you think that they should?
I personally think they should give him the Landon Dickerson treatment and maybe sit him out a game or 2, even though he did practice in full on Friday, and it seems like he's trending towards playing. Because even though he was listed with a concussion, he's wearing that big, bulky knee brace on, and I think you shared the clip in one of your videos earlier this week where he legitimately looked like one of my grandparents would be moving. He was moving very gingerly. I don't know if he was just stretching it out or just he does not look right. And given that he's a smaller center, that his best attribute is his mobility and his speed and his ability to get to that second level. If he's struggling and he can't really move his knee, I feel like they should just put Brett Toth out there, who obviously played really well against the Giants. He's shown some promise, and he does have the athleticism and does seem healthy. So I think they should kind of hold Cam Jurgens back, but I don't know if they necessarily will.
Yeah, they've got, it's funny in this time. Didn't necessarily expect to be saying this, certainly 4 or 5 weeks ago, but it does feel like Brett Toth being the much better option at center for a Cam Jurgens coming because of all the reasons that you mentioned there. But other injury news, Eagles and Cowboys, any major concerns, just kind of updates there for everybody else?
So the most notable one for the Cowboys is Jadeveon Clowney, who I already mentioned. He played well last week. He's kind of been one of their best edge rushers this year. He was limited all week with 2 different injuries. He's officially questionable, so we'll see if he's able to go. On the Eagles side of the ball, Lane Johnson is out. Everybody knows that. We'll see if he gets placed on injured reserve or not. But Cam Jurgens, Myles Hinton, and Willie Lampkin were all officially listed as questionable. Cam Jurgens, like I said, I feel like they should just hold him out, but we'll see what happens. Myles Hinton and Willie Lampkin will have to be activated from injured reserve to play, so that could be something where Lane Johnson gets placed on IR and Myles Hinton replaces him as depth at offensive tackle. But maybe Willie Lampkin finally join. I believe this is the last week of the 21-day window, so he'll have to be activated at some point. And then Jaelan Phillips, who popped up and was limited earlier in the week. I know a lot of people got scared, especially given his injury history, but he was full participant and he's good to go against Dallas.
There we go. We need Jaelan Phillips, especially of all people. The difference that he makes when he's on the field versus not is astronomical, which I mentioned earlier here in this video. But Lane Johnson, for people wondering as well, as of the time of this recording, still nothing official. I know that the news was obviously the sprain to his Lisfranc injury, and the Lisfranc sprain, but he's waiting on swelling to go down on his foot to have an x-ray and then officially determine if he needs to have surgery or not. The initial indication was that he would not, which means, a playoff time most likely. You look around, talk to different team doctors, not a Philadelphia Eagles team doctor, but just different people speculating. The thought seems to be, even if it's a sprain, that it wouldn't be till the divisional round or maybe even the NFC Championship that he would be good to go. That type of an injury with, the possibility of a re-injury if you don't give it the right amount of time. So we'll see. Nothing yet, but keep everyone posted. For the other matchups, though, on offense, because that's a big factor regardless. We're hoping and believing in Fred Johnson, but do you have some areas that, on the offensive side at least, maybe Eagles can try to play to some strengths? Because, Cowboys' defense has been better, but obviously we understand there are some holes.
Yeah, so I'm going to stick right along with that offensive line to start with, because I mean, we mentioned how banged up the Eagles' offensive line is and the way that Dallas's pass rush played against the Raiders. I mean, they had 34 total pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, and officially registered 4 sacks. So they had Geno Smith kind of looking like Jared Goff did against the Eagles last week, where that pass rush looked really scary. So I'm really interested, like I mentioned before, to see if the Eagles can kind of hold up against that new look Cowboys defensive front. But then also I know the topic is how bad the Cowboys secondary is and all these yards that they allow. But if you go back to week 1, the Cowboys played zone coverage in 32 of Jalen Hurts' 33 dropbacks. And everybody knows that kind of the knock on Jalen Hurts is that he can't beat zone coverage. The Eagles struggle against zone coverage. And guess what? The Cowboys are going to do it again once again this week. They've played the 5th most zone coverage this season. They're 5th in the NFL according to NFL Next Gen Stats. On 81.2% of the dropbacks that they face, they play zone coverage. So can the Eagles beat zone coverage? Can Jalen Hurts finally kind of rewrite that chapter of his book where people say what he can't do? He seems to prove the doubters wrong all the time, but can he do it again against the Cowboys?
It would be nice, especially because of the rhetoric, and we're all tired of it at this point. Let me just say this, we've mentioned it, we've talked about it a number of different times. People are going to hear what they want to hear. We're not blaming one offensive person. We're not blaming one offensive aspect for what's been bad. It is a collective piece. It's collective pieces that have made this thing the clunker that it is for the Eagles offense. So for those that say, it's A.J. Brown individually, or it's Kevin Pillow, or whatever, like you could believe that if you want to. But we have said a number of times that it is everyone together in that. Sure, Jalen needs to play sharper. AJ could be better. Routes could be certainly better if you look at what they run versus what they don't run. And there's different options there. But everyone's at a total loss for what this Eagles offense has done. So I'm hopeful. I mean, tried to talk about it earlier this week in a couple video breakdowns of like, okay, so what was a little bit more successful, whenever Shane Steichen or even Kellen Moore more recently, but Kellen Moore against some zone offense or zone defensive coverages, and we're just not seeing anything close to the game plan, the scheme, the routes, and everything else. And you have basically the same guys out there. So it makes no sense. And I understand that part. They've continued to win, which ultimately, obviously, is the only thing that matters. But it is frustrating. And it feels like in a dome, in a controlled environment, not a cold weather game, not a super windy game like they've had recently, it feels like you're going to have to score more than 16 points to pull out a win in this game. But like you say, defensively, not as strong as some of the other ones. So a couple matchups that you're looking at on that side?
Yeah, so the big thing is going to be, we kind of saw the Eagles hold the Cowboys in check in week 1. I mean, George Pickens was held to his worst game with the Cowboys in that first game. Granted, maybe they weren't sure how exactly he was going to fit in the offense and what kind of role he had. Obviously, he's been on a tear in recent weeks. And I think the Eagles are going to test the Cowboys are going to test the Eagles secondary, because although that Eagles defense has been lights out, especially these last 2 games, their one area of weakness is they kind of struggle on these play action deep shots. And unfortunately, Dak Prescott, he's one of the best in the league as far as these deep shots from under center play action. He utilizes it on a career high 28.4% of his dropbacks, according to NFL Next Gen Stats. And if you look at the Eagles, they've allowed 17.8 yards per attempt on downfield passes off play action, which is the most in the NFL. And then even from a total yards aspect, the Eagles have allowed 515 yards on downfield passes off play action, 4th most in the NFL. So this is going to be a huge matchup and part of the game to watch, because obviously Dak Prescott has had some big passing performances against the Eagles in the past. This defense has been so good, but at times, and it felt like if you go back to the All-22 against the Lions, if the Eagles weren't able to bat some of those passes down at the line of scrimmage, there were some holes and leaks in that secondary to take advantage of. So it'll be interesting to see if Dak Prescott can kind of take advantage of the Eagles in that area. And then on the ground, I think the Eagles, it'll be interesting to see how they handle Javonte Williams, because in the first matchup, it felt like whenever the Cowboys gave him the ball, he would get 4 or 5 yards. He was falling forward, kind of like you see Josh Jacobs do a lot. But Javonte Williams has surprised a lot of people this year, and I know you mentioned the stat that I shared earlier in this video. So kind of an underrated key to this game might be if the Eagles can replicate their performance against the Lions, where they shut down Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery on the ground. I know Javonte Williams might not be the same player or the same name that those players are, but he's had a really good year.
Yeah, I believe fifth in rushing yards in the NFL for a reason. So he's getting those touches. He's making the most of his yards, 5 yards a carry, and they are different. The Eagles are certainly different from week 1, but we talked about it right after the game, and as we're watching it, it's like, what do we do? Really? Like, how is it that easy? Because it did feel like, man, they could just pick up chunk yards in the ground game. Then that naturally makes things a lot easier for the passing game. Vic Fangio's got his hands full. He admitted it. You appreciate him keeping it real. He's like, look, that's a very good offense out there. Don't care what the record is. Very good offense, especially the playmakers that they have. So you add all that in, it would be as difficult enough. But then a division rival at their place where Dak has an insane home record against the NFC East, and the Eagles are very, very close now. I talked about the way they could do it, but very close to being able to clinch the division. It feels like really for both teams in different ways. Ceedee Lamb mentioned that it's a win or go home, kind of a must-win scenario. Nick Sirianni was kind of dispelling the notion of, well, we approach every game the same way, which I understand. But A.J. Brown's like, we're desperate too, man. Like, we're desperate, and maybe more so just like find the offensive identity. But you do feel like this is one of those instances where, okay, you've beat some good teams. You've beat some playoff teams. And Dallas right now would not be a playoff team, obviously. But you look back historically, when the Eagles are going to make runs, typically they take care of business. And even if it's with the Cowboys in that situation, even if with Dak, the last time that he was beat at home was and I mentioned this earlier, but in 2017. And we all know what happened in 2017. So, is it a good omen? Perhaps you go in there. I'm not saying we have to beat him 37-9 like happened in 2017, but just a win in itself would be certainly a good thing. And then, wrap up the clinch of the division.
I mean, it's great. And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with the division and things like that, because honestly, it feels like the Eagles should be focused on that number one seed in the NFC overall. And I feel like if they focus on that, then obviously winning the division is going to come along with that. But this game it feels like a huge potential letdown spot for the Eagles, right? But because it feels like the Cowboys are kind of trending in the right direction while the Eagles offensively are kind of trending downward. But that defense, like we've mentioned every week, I just feel like that's the reason that they'll be in any game that they get on the field for. And it, like you mentioned, as far as the last 2 weeks, they've been playing in 15 degree, 20 degree, 30 degree weather with winds. Like, this is going to be a whole different environment. And it feels like, if you watch last week, although the Cowboys got to Geno Smith a lot and the pass looked great, he was actually moving the ball a little bit to start that game through the air, and they found openings in that Dallas defense. So I feel like the Eagles obviously have all the talent in the world to be able to do so. Can they finally put it together? I think they will.
There we go. We need that because there's been way too much negativity out there. Anybody who's on the Twitter sphere, X, whatever, with the Eagles, if you're out there checking stuff out, you've seen or heard or had something shared with you. It's too much negativity. But I will say one thing that I did very much enjoy was the mic'd up footage from the Lions game. And you got Smitty and AJ that are sitting there on the bench. And look, everyone understands this, right? The offense is not playing well. But even in the midst of that, you got both of those guys talking about the Q and the corners, or just really the defense as a whole, but Q and the secondary being able to lock down Amon-Ra St. Brown, because they know the quality of talent that's on the Eagles defense there. So even though there might be some frustrations, or there are definitely some frustrations on the offense, you still have a squad that collectively they're in it for each other. They are celebrating each other's success. But you would also understand that the offense, as they've admitted, is like, we feel like we need to and we want to hold up our end of the bargain and, play to the level that we can, because we are putting a lot of the defense. So I hope that we see it. I'm believing that we can get more of a showing this week. We'll see if we can, accurately predict that. But we did get a couple of the underdog plays. We didn't necessarily get, I think, the first touchdown score last week. But it is time, as we normally do, predict the first touchdown scorer. So who are you going with?
So you just talked about how great the secondary was. So I kind of got to zag and go in a different direction, and I'll upset some people with this, but maybe I'll reel them in with my final score prediction. I think the first touchdown scorer is going to be Ceedee Lamb. I mean, he went for 7 receptions for 110 yards in week 1. He obviously had a couple huge drops against the Eagles. Like I mentioned, against the Lions, there were some holes, and it felt like Cooper DeJean, I know he's played really well all season long, but especially these last 2 weeks, it feels like he's made a couple mistakes that the opposing team didn't necessarily take advantage of. But I could see Ceedee Lamb breaking free and getting a touchdown to start the game against the Eagles.
Okay. Well, I won't totally fault you, depending on how the next portion goes for the score predictions. But with that being said, I understand it too, because Ceedee Lamb had 7 catches, if I'm not mistaken, 6 or 7 catches the last time that we played in Dallas last year, and that was Cooper Rush's quarterback. So, if he gets his typically against the Eagles, even if the talent is not quite there, he didn't have near as many yards and didn't torch them necessarily, but he's going to get his targets. So maybe we'll see. I'm going with maybe a chalkier play, a home play, but I'm going to say Saquon. The Cowboys have given up like the 8th most amount of rushing touchdowns. They've given up more, certainly in terms of the rankings on the passing, but I feel like Saquon's due. It's been too long. He had his 2 touchdown performance against the Giants, and then it's been difficult all day, every single game, even before a couple of games before that. It just feels like it's one of those, and maybe it's a receiving touchdown, but Saquon surely gets in and scores this week. So I'm gonna take Saquon as the first touchdown score.
Let's just get a nice 60+ yard touchdown right out the gate.
That'd be even better.
Barkley,
yes,
like he had against the Giants,
Please.
something like that to just start it off.
Get the monkey off her back. We're not as anxious anymore at that point. Yes, that is what I'm hoping for. So. All right, score prediction, though. You can redeem yourself because I know that people are going to be upset that you took Ceedee as the first touchdown scorer. Who's winning the game?
All right, so this is where I reel people back in. I know they fell for the bait with the Ceedee Lamb pick, but I do think the Eagles are going to win this game. I think they're finally going to break 20 points for the first time it felt like in probably since September. But
yeah,
I have the Eagles winning 27-24 over the Cowboys. I think it's going to be close. I think the Cowboys are going to get their points and find these holes in Vic Fangio's bulletproof defense. It feels like it's been so good. The Cowboys feel like they have the weapons to kind of take advantage of where the Eagles might make mistakes. And we saw if they can lean on Javonte Williams more, maybe that'll help them kind of chew up the clock and get that play action, get pass game going. But it still won't be enough. I think the Eagles are going to be able to move the ball. They'll finally capitalize, and they'll win the game 27-24.
Okay, I like it. You've been redeemed. I'm also taking the Eagles as well, but I'm very close on that score prediction. I'm going to say 28-23. Little odd 5-point, but they cover because they're 3.5 point favorites that the Eagles are. At 23, all the Cowboys have to do practically is get 15 yards there in field goal range. So Brandon Aubrey can make it from anywhere. Fangio, I'm sure, will be a little bit upset about that, as he's mentioned multiple times of how the game has been changed based on that. But playing indoors, it's absolutely ridiculous, the range of that. So I'll say 23. Still get the win. The offense plays better. I'm hopeful that we get at least one Dak turnover. He's done that in several of the last meetings with the Eagles at AT&T Stadium. So maybe we get one of those. Jalen Carter, I mentioned earlier in the video as well, but he's going to be so hyped, so amped up for that game. As long as he can keep his emotions under wrap, I think that we could see him a game wrecker against Tyler Booker, because that he was hoping to do that in week 1. He just didn't get a chance. So, yes, 28-23. The hope is that would be like a backdoor cover or a backdoor, just touchdown. It's not even that close. But either way, as long as we get the win, we're happy. Everybody else, though, as always, drop the first touchdown score in the video here. Get a chance to win any jersey of your choice as long as the Eagles win. Make sure to like and subscribe, and be following Anthony if you are not already at DiBona NFL. Also, the PhillySpecialShow.com for Anthony's articles, game write-ups, injury reports, everything else throughout the season. So appreciate you guys. Let's beat Dallas. Dallas sucks. And go Birds.
Go Birds.
Like I should feel like I should go.